In 1799, George Washington's estate at Mount Vernon held 317 enslaved people. Marble mantels, crystal glassware. But beneath the floorboards, a quilt was stitched with symbols no records described. A bricked tunnel led to silence. What else was erased from his ledgers? A hand-stitched square, a soot-stained tunnel, a name never written. By the time of his death, Washington catalogued livestock and wine, but many human names were absent. His records spoke of abundance, yet not of lives. When liberty was declared, what else was left in silence? This is history's ledger. We read houses by the objects that outlived their owners. Mount Vernon glows upstairs, carved moldings, imported fire surrounds, a table laid for guests, and hums below stairs with footsteps and orders that left only a bell rope in the record. We will follow what the books total and what the walls refuse to say. Turn the first page. The dining room shone like a promise. Italian marble framed the fire. Cut glass caught lamplight. A tea service gleamed with such polish that the cups cast small moons on the table. Upstairs remembered itself. Down the back stair, the air shifted, cooler, coal on the breath. A bell rope hung by the kitchen door, the cord warm where countless hands had smoothed it. That rope knew more names than the ledger. By 1799, 317 people were bound to this place. Some were Washington's property. Many came from Martha Custis's estate. Others were rented or assigned. A man signed for Madeira and livestock. A child born to Linners was listed beside 9 lambs. Same ink, same hen. The house was labor, 6 days from first light to dark. Washington instructed they be at their work as soon as it is light. Work till it is dark. At the Mansion House farm, there were cooks, carpenters, gardeners. On Dog Run and river farms, hands worked crops. Families lived miles apart and called Sunday a road, not a day. A father walked in moonlight to see his children, then back before dawn. Visitors noted the quarters, Hearths, one road in 1798, more miserable than any cottage he'd seen. A boy convulsed on packed earth while smoke clawed the rafters. That same month, 12 guests sat for dinner. The house carried both truths without apology. Some names remain. Owner Judge, Martha's maid, fled north in 1796 when she learned she'd be given away. She reached New Hampshire and lived free. Hercules, the chef, vanished during carnival season in 1797. No notice, just absence. Dogs were hanged when men were suspected of stealing sheep. A rope, either way, held weight. Objects finished the story. A red clay pipe, broken, lay where a servant might have paused. A cuff, embroidered in small letters, was found near a hearth. A mahogany tray bore cup rings, long cooled. In 2024, beneath floorboards, sealed bottles of cherries surfaced, syrup still intact, the has who preserved them long gone. In the North Grove, Trenches and refuse pits mapped a yard the maps never drew. Washington's papers counted barrels and labor lost to weather. He wrote of work regained by order. He did not tally the miles a man walked to see his children, the hours a woman nursed before the kettle, or the burn on a palm from pulling too fast when the upstairs fire wanted more. In his will, Washington directed that those he legally owned be freed after Martha's death. But fear came first. After a blaze in her quarters, she signed papers early. The others, those legally hers, were parceled to heirs with land and books. A column in the estate ledger read only, "Dispersed." There is grandeur here, and a quilt square tucked into the floor, its thread paused mid-knot. One side shows a tree, its branches reaching beyond the field line. The other, a house, stitched without a door. The record offers nothing, but the thread remembers. What lasts longer, marble polished or footsteps worn into dirt? A wine inventory, or the name never written by the hand that poured it? The bell rope lifts, settles. Upstairs, a glass trembles and does not spill. Downstairs, the ledger closes. The day goes on. The week at Mount Vernon began with light and ended with dark. 6 days shaped by the bell rope and the overseer's whistle. Sunday bent time differently. Not rest, but a narrow corridor where families divided by Washington's 5 farms tried to find each other. At the mansion house, cooks and seamstresses rose before dawn, even on Sunday. At Dog Run, 3 miles distant, men set off before light, boots in mud, moon as their lantern, to see wives and children quartered apart. One man would later recall his father made the walk every week, never failed, never excused. The road itself became kin. Washington's ledger placed them in columns: Mansion House, River, Muddy Hole, Union, Dog Run. Numbers where names could have been. He counted barrels of corn, gallons of Madeira, hides of cattle. Not the miles walked to hold a child's hand, nor the hours borrowed from sleep to whisper a prayer beside a hearth. In 1798, Julian Niemczewicz visited and noted huts more miserable than the worst cottages of Poland. Inside, patched clothes hung from rafters above ash-floored hearths. Wooden bowls passed from hand to hand. The smell of smoke clung to everything. And yet, food was shared. Stories passed down. Fragments of faith stitched into stolen hours. Refinement reigned upstairs. Italian marble mantels, gilded sconces, cut glass decanters bright as frost. Downstairs, Sunday was a spoon scraping a wooden bowl, a child's cuff stitched by candlelight, a song hummed too low to be overheard. Owner Judge waited for Sunday to whisper her plan, listening for ships bound north. She slipped away in 1796. Hercules vanished the next year. His name simply disappeared from the menus. Neither absence noted, only the silence that followed. Archaeology retraced what paper denied. Post holes marked old fence lines. Refuse pits held red clay pipes, broken glaze, dye-stained cloth. Quilt squares lost in soil. They are Sunday's testimony, the record the ink refused to keep. Washington's ledger read, sheep 623, wine 54 dozen. A mother rocked her child, knowing the overseer would come Monday. Her husband sat for a moment, hands blistered, then walked the road back through dark. How many miles were walked in hope? How many children knew their father only as a figure in the door? The papers don't answer, but the soil does. The road still carries the groove of those feet, fainter now, but there, pressed into earth deeper than ink ever ran. In 1798, Julian Niemcevich walked the grounds of Mount Vernon and wrote that the cabins were more miserable than the poorest cottages of my own country. He didn't name who lived inside. He noticed the smoke, the huts clustered in rows. Brick chimneys leaned above doors, sagging in frames cut by hand. Clay packed into the walls cracked each winter and crumbled again by spring. The wind always found a way back in. Inside, fire hissed on damp logs. The floor was dirt, beaten flat by feet. A pot swung over coals, broth thin but hot, seasoned with what the week allowed. A ladle passed between hands, the wood smooth from use. Clothes hung from lines strung low across the hearth. Linen patched with wool, colors fading in uneven shades. A child's cuff bore small stitches, letters learned by thread before they were traced in chalk. The smell of ash lived in everything. Objects remembered what paper didn't. A red clay pipe snapped in two, buried beneath a stair. A shard of glazed earthenware unearthed near the North Grove. A quilt square pressed beneath a floorboard. No name, no date, only the rhythm of a hand pulling thread. Above the slope, windows glowed. Guests dined beside Italian marble mantels. Their crystal caught firelight. Sconces shimmered over imported carpets. Below, the cabins flickered like scattered embers in the dark. Smells didn't stay where they belonged. Hickory smoke drifted up from the kitchens. Coal dust clung to skin. Upstairs, the air held beeswax and wine. Downstairs, it tasted of iron and smoke. The contrast was unspoken, but absolute. A guest praised the symmetry of the drawing room, English carpets, tea sets polished weekly. He didn't mention the rooms just steps away, where walls sweated in August and frost crept under blankets in January. What does a house remember? Is memory held in the gleam of marble or the soot on rafters? In crystal rims, or in the heel-shaped hollows pressed into dirt by someone who walked the same path for years? In 2001, preservation crews at Mount Vernon peeled back cellar walls and found what the ledgers never listed: a narrow, bricked tunnel. No plans recorded it, no letters mentioned it, but it was there. Soot streaked the ceiling. The brick curved overhead. Earth hardened beneath faint footprints. The passage ran from the kitchen wing toward the main house, hidden behind mortar, buried under time. Washington's records were exhaustive. Livestock by head, fish by the pound, Madeira by the dozen. But not this. Inside, the air thickened. Damp brick clung to breath. Lantern light bent across the curve, catching flecks of soot that drifted like ash still falling. Each step softened, swallowed by soil. The tunnel did not echo. It absorbed. Above, the house glittered. Italian marble mantels, crystal coupes that rang when touched. Mahogany tea trays polished weekly. Guests wrote of order, elegance, refinement. Below, fragments said otherwise. A red clay pipe broken at the stem, still faint with char. A green glazed shard surfaced near the bricked mouth. In the corner, cloth pressed into clay, weave too fine for work clothes. A cuff, perhaps, or a secret. The house spoke in two tongues. Gilded sconces glowed upstairs. Velvet softened footfalls. Below, brick flickered with fire. Bell ropes hung above, cords frayed where hands pulled them smooth. Above, a faint ring. Below, hurried steps. Both voices belonged to the same place. In 1796, owner judge escaped north. Her name vanished from record. In 1797, Hercules disappeared. The menu stopped listing him. No diary noted his absence. Absence became its own design. The tunnel holds that same silence. No record, no entry. Only soot, only prints, only stone. The five senses render what ink does not. The taste of dust on the tongue, the cold press of stone, the whisper of oil flame, the curve of air where someone once turned, then disappeared. Luxury gleamed just above, Madeira, sweet in the glass, velvet in the chairs, carpets red as brick. But below, the earth kept other truths, broken bowls, worn cloth, fire's black trace. Why was it sealed? After fear? After fire? Or after someone passed through it and didn't return? No record answers. The bricks remain. The table upstairs is still set. Portraits still gaze calmly from the walls. But beneath, in brick and soot and silence, the tunnel waits. What does a house forget? And what does the earth refuse to? Mount Vernon, 1797. A dining table set in candlelight, crystal goblets catching halos, Italian marble glowing faint along the fireplace. A servant's hand steadied a tray, mahogany polished to mirror the cups it carried. Washington's ledger from that month read, Madeira wine, 54 dozen. Sheep, 623. Oxen, 25. Neat, precise. Below that, 9 lambs and 1 male child. No name, just a tally. Ink made animals permanent. People, incidental. Hold that page. The ink has browned, but the refusal remains sharp. A child born, logged without identity. What does it mean to track barrels of flour with care, yet leave a life unnamed? Downstairs, the air was different, thicker. Bell ropes swung in narrow halls, cords worn smooth by unseen hands. One tug, one bell, and someone climbed the stairs in silence. Their names never reached the paper. The ledgers listed shoes delivered, not the miles walked on Sundays to touch a child's hand. They noted candles burned, not the palms blistered lifting wood before sunrise. A guest in 1798 praised the elegance of the rooms, velvet upholstery, gilded sconces, wine that softened the tongue. He didn't write of the cabins nearby, where smoke stained the rafters or the windows held no glass. Both truths lived in one estate. Archaeologists later lifted fragments from the North Grove, clay pipes, chipped bowls, rusted hinges. They speak in touch and weight. No embellishment, no names. But they remember. Upstairs, the rooms are still staged, cutlery aligned, crystal glinting under softened light. But in the estate's final column for human beings, one word appears: dispersed. No surnames, no stories, just absence in perfect handwriting. So what should we believe? The marble admired by guests, or the silence pressed into earth? The wine logged with pride, or the rope worn smooth that pulled someone from sleep? Evening, 1797. Light fell behind the Potomac, and candles flickered in Mount Vernon's dining room. Wax hissed as it touched brass. 12 places were set. Crystal stood in straight lines. Velvet chairs waited in silence. Mahogany trays bore Martha's tea service. Cups polished until they caught the candle glow like miniature suns. Brocade sleeves brushed imported carpets. Every detail rehearsed itself, as if symmetry alone could hold everything together. Washington's ledger for the season read, Madeira, 54 dozen. Sheep, 623. 9 lambs, and 1 male child. A life entered the world, placed between livestock and wine. No name, just ink. A birth flattened into arithmetic. Owner Judge vanished north in 1796. Washington's diary didn't mention her. Letters followed her, written in the language of property. Recovery, return, not freedom. The menus never noted Hercules' absence either, though his food was still served. Silence, again, carried weight. The house held its contrast in quiet. Upstairs, polish and light. Downstairs, soot and labor. Bell ropes hung in hallways, their cords smoothed by thousands of hands. Pulled too quickly, and the hemp burned. Above, a bell rang. Below, someone moved. Visitors praised the glow of sconces, velvet drapes, Madeira that lingered sweet on the tongue. At the same hour, fire hissed against cast iron in the kitchens. Embers spat onto stone. The same dinner made by two worlds, one admired, one erased. Later, fragments told what pages did not. A red clay pipe found near a stair, a button smoothed by fingers, a chipped bowl with its glaze worn thin. In the North Grove, rusted hinges from a chest long lost. Each piece, quiet, stubborn, refused to disappear. Hercules' name vanished from the menus in 1797. No notice, no explanation. But the roasts still came. Guests still wrote of fine order. Did anyone taste the silence? The house balanced polish against absence. Crystal chimed upstairs while iron clanged below. Gilded sconces glowed. Bell ropes frayed. The marble held warmth. The tunnel stayed cold. In 1799, Washington wrote that his enslaved people would be freed after Martha's death. But a fire near her room changed that. Within a year, she signed early. Even then, it wasn't everyone. The Custis estate, over half the people at Mount Vernon, remained enslaved, passed down with china and ledgers. His final account listed every object, under human beings, dispersed. No names, no farewells. So which part of the house tells its truth? The glint of crystal above, or the soot buried just below? In winter 2001, beneath warped boards in a service room, they found it, cloth folded flat, pressed into the dirt. A quilt square, small, threadbare, but clear. One side held a stitched tree, branches arcing outward, reaching beyond the square. The other, a house, 4 walls, no door. It wasn't in any ledger. Washington's records listed wine, oxen, fish, brass hinges, marble imports, sugar by the pound. But not this, not thread pulled in silence, not hands sewing by firelight in rooms never named. The room would have smelled of smoke and coal ash, wool left damp to dry. If you touched the cloth now, you'd feel the raised knots, some tight, some rushed. The stitch carried rhythm, a quiet that speaks more than any page. Above, the mansion gleamed. Crystal goblets caught halos. Velvet curtains held back winter wind. Italian marble mantels shimmered in brass light. Guests praised the order, the refinement, the elegance of permanence. They didn't know what lay beneath their feet. Around the square, fragments echoed the silence. A clay pipe snapped in two, green glazed earthenware dulled by ash, bone buttons small enough for a child's cuff. The soil held what the ink erased. Washington counted Madeira by the dozen, livestock by breed, but not the hands that sewed a house with no door, not the fingers that bent to cloth while the world upstairs polished silver. The contrast remains sharp. Above, roast meats, laughter, the scent of polish and pears. Below, thread drawn through cloth beside coal smoke and prayer. Was the tree a symbol? Was the house a warning? The quilt was hidden, not forgotten, concealed, folded where only time could find it. Was it a map? A message? A memory? The boards still creak where visitors pass. Upstairs, glass trembles gently when touched, but beneath, the fabric waits, silent, stitched with what no page could say. Which will endure longer, the marble trimmed in candlelight, or the thread pulled through silence by a hand we'll never know? The quilt square waited more than 2 centuries, folded beneath floorboards, stitched in silence. When it surfaced in 2001, lanterns lit its surface, revealing the stubborn images. A tree reaching outward, a house with no door. No ledger recorded it. Washington's inventories listed Madeira, marble, molasses, tea. Every shipment, every hint. But not this. Not the hand that stitched meaning into cloth. Not the silence hidden underfoot. The room once smelled of coal smoke and damp wool. The thread still holds that air. Each knot rose under a fingertip, uneven from a hand that stitched by firelight. Not art, message. Above, the mansion rehearsed refinement, crystal like frost, velvet thick enough to mute wind, marble catching the soft glow of wax. Visitors praised the language of elegance, but cloth spoke its own. Beneath those boards, the ground carried fragments, a pipe bowl, still faint with char, a green glazed shard dulled by ash, a child's bone button, worn smooth. Each piece a sentence the ledger refused. Was the tree on the quilt a direction? A map stitched in secret? Was the sealed house a warning? No safety, no return, or grief, coded in quiet lines. It wasn't hung, not displayed. It was buried, hidden from eyes that might misunderstand or destroy. Above, firelight brushed imported carpets. Madeira warmed polished glass. Plates gleamed. But below, the quilt waited, its thread remembering a truth ink never tried to hold. Washington's estate ledger closed with the word dispersed. No names, just order in silence. The quilt said more. What do we trust more? The wine logged with pride, or the square of fabric folded to survive? The mansion still glows for visitors, but beneath, the thread persists. It carries a question no account ever answered. What was that house without a door meant to keep out? And what was it meant to carry through? The dining room at Mount Vernon glowed under wax light. Silver chimed softly on porcelain. Crystal goblets shimmered. Marble caught the fire's warmth. Mahogany trays reflected what they carried. Roast meats, sweet preserves, gleaming glass. The room had rhythm. Guests reclined into velvet chairs. Imported carpets hushed their steps. Madeira breathed into the air. Everything had its place. Everything except certain names. Washington's ledger for the season recorded Madeira 54 dozen, sheep 623, oxen 25, and then 9 lambs and 1 male child. No name, just a number placed between livestock and ink. What does it mean when a birth becomes inventory? The air upstairs smelled of beeswax and wine, but below, brick walls and burned pots. Smoke lingered. Bell ropes swung in darkened halls, cords worn smooth. A ring above, a step below. No name followed the sound. Conflict didn't shout. It erased. Hercules, the chef praised for elegance, disappeared in 1797. His name vanished from menus. Guests still dined, still praised the meals. No one wrote of his absence. Archaeology later found what the ink avoided: a snapped pipe bowl, still charred, a child's button, smoothed by touch, a chipped, green glazed shard. Objects whispered. The ledger had space for barrels and oxen, but not for a man's departure, not for footsteps down a corridor no one admitted existed. Visitors praised the house's symmetry, crystal, sconces, Madeira. But every dinner came with its shadow, clangs in the kitchen, fire hissing, bell ropes burning skin. Which sound belonged to Mount Vernon? Which silence? Today, the upstairs still gleams. Everything is in its place. Which record is truer? The polished fork placed beside porcelain, or the broken pipe that never left the earth? Candles hissed above a table long enough for 12. Crystal goblets chimed when set too firmly. Firelight caught in marble veining. Silver forks stood in perfect lines beside porcelain shipped from overseas. Velvet chairs creaked softly as guests leaned in. Letters from that winter praised the symmetry, the glow, the sense of permanence, and the ledger, always precise, read Madeira 54 dozen, sheep 623, oxen 25. Then, quietly, 9 lambs and 1 male child. No name, no record of breath, only inventory. The same ink used for wine and wool. Upstairs, beeswax sweetened the air. Mahogany trays bore dishes polished to reflect light. Madeira glowed like garnet, but step below and the scent changed. Ash clung to walls, bell ropes dangled in the dark, frayed by hands never listed. A pull above, a response below. No diary recorded who answered. Mount Vernon moved in layers. Upstairs, guests sipped wine from crystal. Below, the fire cracked. Water boiled in soot-dark pots. 2 worlds serving 1 table. Some stories vanish without notation. In 1796, owner-judge fled. In 1797, Hercules disappeared. Neither name appeared again, but the ledgers carried on. Shoes, 24 pairs. Salted fish, 18 barrels. No mention of the hands that vanished between them. Later, the ground spoke. A clay pipe snapped clean. A fabric scrap pressed into clay. A cuff too small for any ledger entry. Archaeologists lifted these from silence. Above, velvet still muffled footsteps. Silver gleamed. The Madeira returned to its shelf. But nothing in the account books could explain the soot in the tunnel or the prints pressed into soil. So what survives longer, polish or memory? If this story moved you, if the thread of silence spoke louder than the sparkle of glass, tell us. Leave a comment below. Tap like. Subscribe. Not just for more stories, but for the truths the pages left behind. In 2001, the bricks gave way. Preservation crews clearing a cellar wall at Mount Vernon uncovered a corridor no diagram showed. A narrow passage, curved, soot dark, sealed for centuries. It ran from the kitchen wing toward the main house. No ledger mentioned it. No inventory traced its path. Washington's accounts had catalogued everything: Madeira, oxen, brass hinges, firewood by the cord. But this passage, carved, used, vanished, was absent. Inside, the air grew colder. Brick dampened every step. The smell was metallic, like stone that had sweated for too long. Lantern light fanned across the ceiling, catching streaks where smoke once curled. The soot still shimmered. Each step was swallowed. The tunnel didn't echo. It remembered. Above, refinement gleamed. Crystal goblets sang faintly when touched. Gilded sconces lit Italian marble. Velvet curtains muffled wind. Every detail rehearsed. Below, fragments spoke another language. A red clay pipe snapped in two. A shard of green glazed earthenware. A thread-worn scrap of cloth. Maybe a cuff. Maybe a memory. They were the remains of people the ledgers didn't name. The house told two stories, one with Madeira and silver, the other with soot and silence. Ropes swung in narrow halls, their cords smoothed by palms the ink forgot. A ring above, a step below, both rehearsed, both real. In 1796, owner Judge walked north. Her name vanished. In 1797, Hercules disappeared. No pursuit was recorded. Only space where their names once were. The tunnel holds that kind of silence, not forgotten, removed. The five senses did what the pages wouldn't. Soot on the tongue, cold brick under the palm, a hiss of oil flame echoing against damp stone, breath curling in air too quiet to fill. Above, mahogany trays bore roasted meats. Crystal glinted. The room glowed like memory preserved. Below, soot clung where no cloth could reach. Silence pressed in from all sides. Why seal it? Fear? Fire? Escape? The mortar gave no reason, but the prints remained. curved mid-stride, like someone had turned and never come back. Upstairs, everything remains staged. Visitors walk the halls, admiring light and balance. But the bricks beneath carry the memory the house chose not to explain. Winter, 2001. A service room. Warped floorboards pried loose, dust brushed aside. Beneath them, cloth, folded flat, thread frayed, symbols stitched, silent but clear. One side, a tree, branches reaching past the edge of the square. The other, a house, 4 walls, no window, no door, a place sealed even in thread. Washington's ledgers held no space for it. He wrote of barrels, bolts of linen, crates of Madeira. He measured the arrival of marble and the weight of hinges, but not this. Not cloth sewn in silence, not the hand that stitched and hid it. The room would have smelled of coal and wool, left damp from frost. If you touched the fabric now, you'd feel the uneven rhythm, knots raised where thread pulled too tight. A memory held in texture, not ink. Above, order gleamed, crystal aligned in neat rows. Velvet caught the light, fire danced in marble mantels. Guests wrote of polish, of permanence. But this square, it wasn't made to be seen. Around it, fragments surfaced. A red clay pipe, chipped green bowl, a button small enough for a child's shirt. They waited beneath the boards, holding what the ledgers let slip. Was the tree a map? A prayer? Were the branches paths? Was the doorless house a warning? A truth? A message too dangerous to say aloud? The quilt square was hidden, not forgotten, pressed into earth like a secret left for time. The boards above still groan. Visitors pass, feet softened by carpets and silence. But beneath them, this square remains. No ink named it, but it endures. And so we ask again, which memory holds more truth, the gleam above or the thread stitched quietly below? Mount Vernon after dusk. Silver rang lightly on porcelain. Crystal caught firelight and sang when touched. Velvet chairs creaked beneath brocade coats. The dining room held its ritual. Everything gleamed. Everything waited. Julian Niemcewicz, a Polish noble, visited that year. He praised the symmetry of the house, the soft light, the refinement. But he also wrote of the cabins, miserable huts, he called them. Both descriptions were true. Both lived in the same breath. Washington's ledgers captured only one. On the same page where Madeira was logged by the dozen, he wrote, 9 lambs and 1 male child. No name, no family, just placement between livestock. Upstairs, beeswax and wine filled the air. Below, coal ash and boiled wool. Bell ropes swung. A pull from above meant a step below. No record followed. Fragments fill the silence. A pipe bowl snapped, a bone button smoothed by touch, a green glazed shard dulled by ash. They remember what ink refused. Owner Judge left in 1796. Her name vanished. In 1797, Hercules disappeared. The kitchen continued. Menus did not. No entry marked their absence. But the silence grew. Above, velvet muffled voices. Below, pots clanged. The same dinner, carried by two worlds. One admired, the other erased. Today, the teacups still gleam. Martha's service is arranged with care. Curtains hang thick. Visitors repeat Niemcewicz's praise, symmetry, elegance, grace. But the tunnel found in 2001 still darkens under the house. The Quilt square still rests folded beneath glass. So, which version of Mount Vernon survives? The year is no longer 1799, it is now. Visitors move through Mount Vernon's restored halls, past marble mantels, cut glass goblets, velvet chairs. The air smells of polish and old wood. The rooms are quiet, curated, reverent. Then, a stare, a turn. The light shifts. Beneath the house, something different waits. The tunnel, discovered in 2001, bricked shut and soot dark. It stretches beneath the east wing. Smoke still streaks the ceiling. Lanterns catch the trace of flame long gone. The air is cold. The bricks feel damp. A hush wraps the corridor like breath unspoken. Washington's ledgers were exhaustive. Firewood, Madeira, marble. But not this passage. Not these steps. Not the soot. Why? Was it used for quiet movement? For watching? For escaping? Fragments nearby sharpen the silence. A pipe, cracked. A cloth scrap, ground into soil. A shoe print, curved as if someone turned and never came back. Above, refinement holds. Crystal gleams. Mahogany trays reflect soft light. Velvet absorbs each footstep. The stage remains set. Below, nothing performs. The tunnel absorbs every sound. In 1798, Niemcewicz praised the house's elegance. He also saw the cabins. Miserable, he wrote. He saw both truths. Most only wrote one. Today, a visitor walks through drawing rooms and descends into stillness. So what is Mount Vernon? The glass above or the soot below? And what else remains hidden, sealed in brick, waiting for air? The discovery came not from ledgers, not from archives, but from under a floor. In 2001, when preservationists lifted the warped boards of a service room at Mount Vernon, they brushed aside dust and soil and found something folded flat into silence. A quilt square. The fabric was faint, edges frayed, but its images remained stubborn. One side held a tree, its branches curved outward, stitched in arcs. as though they wanted to reach beyond the borders of the cloth itself. The other showed a house, 4 walls, solid, but no door, no window, closed, silent, a space sealed even in imagination. Washington's ledgers had no place for it. He wrote about Madeira, dozens of bottles arriving by ship. He logged livestock in hundreds, bushels of grain, barrels of salted fish. His papers measured rainfall, recorded new marble imported from London, listed silver forks by count. But nowhere, not once, do the records speak of a square of cloth, thread pulled by hand, folded into a floor as if for safekeeping. The room where it lay once smelled of smoke that sank low under the rafters, leaving soot dark against beams. Damp wool hung from pegs, sour with frost. Coal ash clung to the taste of the air. If you touched the quilt, your fingertips would feel the uneven knots, places where the hand had pulled too firmly, thread rising like scars. Imagine the sound of that hand working the needle, puncturing the weave again and again, steady as breath, low as a whisper. Above, the house rehearsed its grandeur. Crystal goblets chimed faintly when set down too quickly. Velvet curtains hushed the wind, absorbing the creak of shutters. Italian marble mantels reflected firelight in veined glow. Mahogany trays bore dishes polished until they gleamed under wax halos. Guests in 1798 described it as elegance refined, the kind of permanence a new nation wanted to display. But permanence is fragile when it refuses to name what lies beneath. Archaeology in the North Grove unearthed fragments that echo the quilt's silence. A red clay pipe snapped in two, char still clinging to its bowl. A bone button, worn smooth, small enough for a child's cuff. A green glazed shard from a bowl, dulled by years of ash. These are not rehearsed objects. They are fragments of lives unnamed, sentences that survive without paper. The quilt itself is a riddle. Was the tree a symbol of hope, branches spreading like paths outward, a map stitched in silence? Was the house without a door a warning? No entry here, no safety here, walls that trap more than they shelter? Or was it sorrow, a message pressed into fabric by someone who knew her name would never reach ink, but could survive in thread? Why hide it? Why fold it into the earth, under boards, away from sight? Was it meant to be found, centuries later, by hands that would finally see its weight? Or was it meant only to endure quietly, carrying meaning known only to those who sewed it? The contrasts upstairs sharpen the questions. A visitor in 1797 praised Washington's wine, Madeira of the finest sweetness. Letters from that season note the gleam of sconces, the order of the table, the way crystal coupes caught the glow of firelight. Yet the same year, Hercules, the chef who presided over that table, vanished. No announcement, no entry, just absence. The quilt holds that same kind of silence, a story folded away, deliberately unwritten. Step into the mansion today, and you can feel the split. Rooms shine with rehearsed abundance, gilded sconces glowing, velvet drapes restored, porcelain lined neat on tables. Below, behind glass, the quilt square rests folded, faint but still alive with thread. Which tells the truer story, the polish admired in letters, or the stitch that refused to disappear? The house asks the question each time you walk its halls. Is its memory marble, imported and admired? Or fabric, stitched in smoke and hidden away? Perhaps the sharper question is this: how many more threads remain under boards, waiting, carrying what ledgers refuse to hold? A spoon grazed porcelain, soft, measured. The sound lingered for a moment before being absorbed into velvet curtains and wax-polished wood. The dining room, Mount Vernon, December 1799, glowed as it always had. Crystal coupes stood in pairs. Silver forks rested in perfect alignment. Mahogany trays bore the weight of ceramic warmed by roast steam. And the Madeira was still sweet, still poured in circles, still catalogued. Washington had not yet died, but the house was already rehearsing silence. He had fallen ill days before. Inflammation of the throat, they said. A chill caught during his usual ride across the property. No one imagined how quickly the cold would settle, or how quiet the ledges would become in its wake. The drawing room still reflected its abundance. The Italian marble over the hearth glowed in firelight, veined with pale ribbons like frozen breath. Chairs creaked beneath brocade coats. Candlelight bent across imported carpets, stitched in deep red and cream. The smell of beeswax floated just beneath the stronger scents of cooked pear, clove, and wood smoke. Everything was in order, and yet the final ledges from that season had begun to thin. The neat hand that once recorded Madeira by the dozen, oxen by the pair, and the delivery of carpets from England now paused more frequently. Some lines remained clean and tight. Others, entire columns meant for people, fell still. No record marked Hercules' absence. His name had disappeared from the menu books in 1797 without explanation. No entry followed Ona Judge after she escaped north in 1796. Letters pursued her, but the ledger did not. One winter guest, Julian Orson Niemcevich, recorded his admiration for the house. He described the plastered walls, the symmetry of the rooms, the way the firelight caught on crystal so fine it hummed when touched. He called it refinement. He also noted the cabins at the edge of the field, huts more miserable than the poorest cottages of Poland. Both truths held in the same breath. Only one made it to the ledger. The night of December 14th arrived cold and still. A wind pressed against the shutters, muffled by layers of velvet and paneling. Inside, the house slowed. No bell rang. The hall ropes hung untouched, their cords frayed by 1,000 palms, now at rest. The fire cracked softly. A goblet trembled. as someone stood from their chair. Wax spilled across silver, cooling in quiet shapes. When Washington died just after 10 p.m., the moment did not announce itself. It settled. The will that followed was meticulous. His enslaved people, he wrote, were to be freed. But not yet. Only after Martha's death. A promise deferred, and the others, the Custis estate, remained bound. Names were drawn into columns, then split among heirs alongside furniture, land, and books. The final estate record bore a single word beside them: dispersed. Nothing more. No dates, no initials, no acknowledgement. The absence was so precise it looked like order, and still, Mount Vernon remained beautiful. The upstairs rooms continued to glimmer. Crystal was cleaned and returned to cabinets. Velvet was fluffed. The carpets kept their colors. The Madeira returned to its shelves. Logged again. The house knew how to preserve its image. It always had. But the silence had already begun pressing upward. Years later, the North Grove gave up fragments. A red clay pipe snapped at the stem. A shard of green glazed earthenware, chipped and dulled by time. A bone button small enough to slip between floorboards unnoticed. And then, beneath warped planks in a service room, a quilt square, folded, hidden. One side bore a stitched tree, the other a house with no door. The ledgers never mentioned it, nor did they mention the narrow tunnel running beneath the mansion, discovered in 2001, bricked shut, blackened by soot. Footprints still pressed in the hardened soil. No blueprint marked its path. No inventory named its use. Only its silence remains. What else had the estate chosen not to remember? Washington's records captured rainfall. They measured grain. They noted the arrival of marble and the weight of iron hinges, but not the thread pulled by hand in a cold room, not the cough of someone walking 3 miles through night just to touch their child's cheek before dawn, not the pipe smoked and snapped before morning orders rang out, not the ones who vanished, only the wine remained. So which memory endures? The crystal goblets reflecting candle halos, or the word dispersed, smooth and final in its ink? The imported carpet soft beneath polished shoes, or the footprints pressed into a bricked-over tunnel that no one recorded? And when the last guest left the table, and the final light burned low on marble mantels, which part of Mount Vernon kept speaking? The ledger may have stopped, but the silence did not. The letter is dated August 12th, 1800. Ink brown with age. Paper creased at the fold. A slight tear at the bottom edge, where the wax seal had pulled too sharply. The handwriting is careful, not decorative, but precise, as though each word had been measured before it was allowed to land. Mount Vernon is changed, it begins, not in surface. In sensation, the writer signed as E. Hargrove, likely Eleanor, a cousin by marriage to one of Martha's visiting acquaintances. She had first stayed at the estate in December 1798, while Washington still lived. The second visit, months after his death, revealed something she couldn't name, only describe. The dining room, she writes, was still immaculate. Crystal coupes gleamed beneath candle halos. The Italian marble mantel bore its usual polish, veins catching the firelight like lines on a map. Chairs stood in their places. Cutlery was laid as if waiting. A tray of Madeira stood uncorked. Everything was in its place, she writes, but it no longer felt placed. She doesn't explain what that means. Instead, she notes the silence. Not the solemn kind, but a silence that seems to push outward. She describes it as a quiet with shape, like a curtain drawn across a stage after the players have gone, and then something stranger. I walked the upper corridor just after dusk. The window was open. I could smell clove from the kitchen wing, and something else, something like scorched linen, as if a candle had kissed fabric and vanished before leaving a flame. She mentions nothing of the tunnel, sealed, blackened with soot, but her words echo the scent of it. The tunnel had been discovered centuries later, in 2001, when preservationists lifted a false wall near the foundation. They found bricks, tightly packed, ceiling curved, streaked with black. No diagram of the house showed the passage. No ledger named it. And yet, it had been walked. Prints still pressed in hardened earth. Had she known it was there? She says only this. The stair to the cellar creaked 3 times, and no one descended. I stood at the top, listening. There's another line that follows, crossed out. Ink dragged through by a blunt quill, but the indent remains beneath it. A single word, breath. She continues. Martha sat near the south window. She did not smile. She touched the corner of the tablecloth and smoothed it for some time without looking up. No mention of the fire that came near her chamber earlier that spring. No reference to why she had relocated her bed. The will had promised freedom after her passing, but the signatures came early. Some said it was fear. Some said it was the weight of too many eyes watching silence take shape. The ledgers from that summer are sparse. A note about barrels arriving from Alexandria, an entry about a shipment of tea, a line about a new hinge on the kitchen door, but not one mention of where Martha now slept. Not a word about who folded the linen or who did not. Eleanor's letter returns to the dining room. I thought I saw a mark on the wall near the hearth. Faint, as though a ribbon had once hung there too long and the sunlight had bleached around it. But when I looked again, it was gone. Sometimes memory isn't erased, it simply hides beneath polish. And then, the closing. She ends not with farewell, but with a dream. I have seen this house before, in sleep. A hallway in green, a door without handle, no way to enter, and behind it, a breath that waits. The image is familiar, the house without a door stitched into a quilt square, the one found in 2001, folded beneath floorboards in a service room. It had no explanation, no label, only thread and memory. And so the question lingers, had she seen something beneath the surface? Or had the house simply shown her what the ledges refused? There's no answer, only the letter, only the trace of ink, the broken line beneath the word breath, and the memory of a place where silence was not absence, but presence in disguise. It was found behind a crumbling beam in the old cellar. The bottle was intact, dark glass, faintly green, thick at the neck. The seal unbroken. The wax, brittle but still whole. No label remained, but the shape matched those used for fruit preserves in the late 18th century. Squat, wide, made for weight. When archaeologists lifted it in 2004, the glass felt unusually cold. Dust clung to it. A single thumbprint, hardened in time, sat on the base. The wax bore a shallow mark, not a stamp, but the edge of a thread once tied tight. It hadn't been catalogued. It hadn't been mentioned in any inventories from the estate. Not even in the detailed kitchen records from 1798, where preserved cherries, apricots, and pears were itemized with great care. This one had been placed, not stored, and not for eating. When held to the light, something inside moved, slowly, like syrup thickened by time. Was it meant to be forgotten or saved? The cellar itself once held shelves stacked with glass, decanters, vinegars, jars of spices. The room smelled of cork, damp stone, and the faint sting of vinegar turned sharp. It was cool year-round, walled in thick brick. Beneath it, just a few feet of soil and then bedrock. No windows, no candle would last long in that space. The smoke curled too tightly. Mount Vernon's kitchen records from 1797, signed by Overseer Thomas Peter, detailed 18 pounds of sugar used for preserving cherries, another 12 pounds for apricots. But the volume was always consumed within the season. None of it was meant to outlast winter. So who sealed this bottle, and why? Upstairs, refinement remained unchanged. In letters from March 1800, Martha Washington described the china as delicately repacked after her husband's death. The silver was returned to its place. The library remained in strict order, no volumes disturbed. The parlor chairs were reupholstered armored in new damask, deep rust red, stitched in gold thread. She didn't mention the cellar. She didn't mention the tunnel either, or the strange scent near the hearth. But a letter to her niece hints at something else. A single sentence buried between pleasantries. I cannot bear the smell in the east stairwell some days. Perhaps it is only the stone. Was it? The brick tunnel ran close beneath that wing, and the bottle was found within 10 feet of its hidden path. Inside, beneath the wax and glass, the contents had darkened, not spoiled, preserved, unopened, still. One guest, a merchant named Thomas Law, who dined at Mount Vernon in 1799, once wrote that Martha's cherry preserves were sweeter than any I had tasted in Europe. He praised the polish of the dining table, the crisp folds of linen, the glint of candlelight on silver spoons. But that same night, he reported a faint tremor in the floor beneath his chair. He said nothing more about it. The bottle now rests in a climate-controlled case, not displayed publicly. Its contents remain untested. No one dares open it, not out of fear, but out of respect. What if it was never meant to be consumed? What if it was a message, a memorial, or a warning? Some objects don't age. They wait. And in waiting, they begin to remember things no one wrote down. It wasn't listed in any collection, not in the archives, not in the estate guide, not in the inventories handwritten by Martha's granddaughters, or by the curators who walked the property with gloves and clipboards. It was found by chance, or by pattern. In 2017, during a minor upholstery restoration of an 18th century traveling trunk stored in the second-floor guest chamber, a conservator noticed a thin crack in the lining. The fabric was original, pale linen, faded with time, edges stitched by hand. There was nothing remarkable about it until it moved, just slightly, a breath beneath the cloth. They peeled the lining gently, not expecting much. But behind it, folded once, was paper, dry, thin, almost brittle. Ink faded but still legible in slanted hand. No date, no signature, no greeting. One line. The names are not gone, only placed elsewhere. That was all. No instructions, no context. The letter was unsigned. The paper bore no seal, no watermark, no house emblem. And yet the handwriting bore resemblance to that in Washington's own financial logs, but altered, softer, as though someone had mimicked his hand or learned to write beneath it. A servant, a family member, a ghost from the margins. The trunk itself had belonged, according to earlier inventories, to Lund, Washington, the general's distant cousin and estate manager during the war years. He had traveled with it between Alexandria and Philadelphia. Inside it were scraps, bits of ribbon, a broken comb, a pressed flower turned grey. But this note was not visible until the lining tore. And the message, was it an apology, a clue, or something else entirely? The room where the trunk was stored had once housed guests from overseas. A diary from 1791, written by David Humphreys, mentions a trunk near the foot of the bed, locked with brass and bearing scuff marks from sea travel. He never mentioned what was inside, but the note feels older. Older than the paper it's written on. Older than the room. Perhaps older than the silence that had gathered in the tunnels below. Because when you read that single line, the names are not gone, only placed elsewhere. Something shifts. The ledgers return. The thread pulls tight. The bottle stays sealed. And the door stitched shut on the quilt square feels, for just a moment, like it could open, but only if you know where to look and who was meant to find it. The house still stands. It gleams, even now, under restoration lights and the slow hush of visitor footsteps. Crystal in cabinets, polished silver along mantels, velvet chairs refitted with care. Every surface rehearses its past. Every hallway smells faintly of wax and old wood. But below, something holds. The quilt square lies beneath glass in the service room, folded once, thread frayed at the edges. One side bears a stitched tree, its branches reaching past the cloth's border. The other, a house. 4 walls, no door, no window, only enclosure. It was never listed in the ledgers. Washington recorded Madeira by the dozen, barrels by the cord, oxen and lambs in exacting script. But not this, not the thread, not the silence, not the meaning pressed gently into cloth by a hand we will never name. December 1799. The final page. His estate was closed with a single word, dispersed, nothing more. Not a name, not even a number, just the gentle curve of ink, a dismissal dressed as administration. The tunnels beneath the house had already been sealed by then. The soot along their ceiling still bears the marks of flame. Footprints remain in the hardened soil, shallow but certain, curved as though mid-turn. No account book mentions them, but the brick remembers. So does the cellar. That's where the sealed bottle was found, behind a beam, near the mouth of the tunnel. The glass was thick, greenish, its wax seal still unbroken. Inside, a dark liquid moved slowly when tilted, heavy with time. It wasn't listed on any inventory, not in 1798, not in 1800. Was it meant to be preserved or hidden? And what does it mean that no one touched it for 200 years? Martha's letters from the spring of 1800 speak of grief in practiced language. She wrote about the garden, about the drawing room. She asked after the china, but in one line, buried deep, she confessed, "I cannot bear the east corridor. It smells of stone and something older." She never mentioned the quilt, or the tunnel, or the bottle. But perhaps she didn't need to, because the house by then was already remembering itself, not in ledgers, not in letters, but in the things that survived without paper. The bone button in the North Grove, the clay pipe snapped in two, the fabric pressed into dirt behind the hearth. They remain, without explanation, without approval. And isn't that the sharper truth? That sometimes the objects outlive the stories that tried to erase them? The marble still shines upstairs, but the silence below has begun to echo. So what lasts longer, the polish admired in letters, or the thread folded beneath a board? What carries weight, the symmetry described by visitors, or the stitch that still holds, centuries later, without name, without ink? And what else, even now, lies under the floorboards, waiting? If this story reached you, if the silence spoke louder than the pages, if the glint of glass or the thread of a vanished name stayed with you. We'd love to hear from you. Tap that like button. Leave us a comment. Tell us what part lingered. And if you want to keep unfolding the pieces history tried to fold away, subscribe. And the next video is The Untold Truth of America's Cotton Empire. It begins with cloth again, but not folded gently. And this time, the fabric remembers.